It started like any other Saturday morning. The sun was just starting to burn off the early haze. The streets were quiet. And I was finally getting a chance to ride the motorcycle I'd been restoring for months. It was a 1994 Harley-Davidson. FXR chrome polished, engine tuned to perfection, and just loud enough to feel the rumble in your chest without waking the dead. I took pride in keeping it clean and respectful. No revving in the driveway. No speeding through the neighborhood. Just a short, smooth cruise down the street before I hit the highway. But apparently, not everyone shared my appreciation for good engineering. The first letter from the HOA came 3 days later. A plain envelope, no greeting, no warning. Just a citation for violating community noise standards, and a vague accusation that my motorcycle was disruptive to the peaceful environment. I chuckled, assuming it was just a formality or maybe a mistake. After all, my closest neighbors had waved at me that morning. No one had said anything. But it wasn't a mistake. The next morning, I found Karen standing in her driveway with her. Arms crossed, eyes locked on me like a sniper. Karen was the self-appointed queen of our cul-de-sac, always organizing petty complaints and gossip threads on the HOA Facebook group. She didn't just dislike rule breakers, she hunted them. I gave her a polite nod and rolled my bike gently out of the garage. She didn't nod back. Later that day, I got another letter. This time, it claimed I had refused to acknowledge previous warnings. I hadn't even had time to reply to the first one. And now they were threatening to escalate the issue, whatever. That meant I decided to attend the next HOA meeting to clear things up. It was held in the community clubhouse, a place that felt more like a courtroom when people like Karen were in charge. I walked in wearing a clean t-shirt, jeans, and holding a folder with decibel level reports and motorcycle regulations from the city. I wasn't trying to start a fight. I just wanted to explain that my bike met legal standards. Karen was already there, sitting in front with a smug look on her face. She had copies of her own photos of me riding out of my driveway, notes on the supposed times of disturbances, and even a printed-out list of alternative transportation options. She made it sound like I was running a demolition derby. Every morning, I calmly explained my side. I pointed out that my motorcycle was within legal limits, that I only rode it a few times a week, and that I never rode it late at night. I even offered to install a quieter exhaust, just to be neighborly. But Karen wasn't having it. "This isn't just about the noise," she snapped, interrupting me mid-sentence. "It's about the tone it sets. This is a family neighborhood. A biker gang hangout." That comment got a few uncomfortable chuckles from the board, but mostly silence. I left the meeting frustrated, but still hopeful. I figured maybe things would cool down. Maybe the board would realize this was all a bit much. Maybe Karen would find a new hobby. No such luck. Over the next week, things got weird. Someone left an anonymous note on my porch that said, "Go ride somewhere else." Another day, I came home to find a pile of mulch dumped just a foot in front of my garage, blocking my bike in. No one saw anything. No one heard anything. But the message was clear. Then came the final straw. On a sunny Thursday morning, I rolled my bike out like usual. I wasn't even planning to ride it. I just needed to rearrange my garage. As I was standing beside it, checking the mirrors, I heard tires screeching. Karen's white SUV came tearing around the corner. She was on her phone, one hand on the wheel. And she wasn't slowing down. I stepped back instinctively, and in that split second, she swerved just slightly but enough for her passenger side mirror to clip my handlebar. The bike tipped, scraped the driveway, and slammed into the pavement with a gut-wrenching crunch. Karen slammed on her brakes, jumped out of the SUV, and shouted, "You shouldn't leave that thing in the middle of the road." Except, it wasn't in the road. It was in my own driveway, 10 feet away from the curb. I was stunned, furious. My bike was scratched, The mirror cracked and the clutch lever bent sideways. Karen didn't even look at the damage. She just got back in her car, muttering something about community safety, and drove off. That night, I took pictures of everything and filed a police report. But something in me snapped. This wasn't just about a motorcycle anymore. This was about control. About a woman who had decided that her preferences were more important than my rights. And I wasn't about to roll over and let her win. What she didn't know was that I had cameras, footage, witnesses, and I had a plan. The morning after Karen's SUV struck my motorcycle, I woke up to the dull ache of both anger and helplessness. I'd spent over a year rebuilding that bike piece by piece, paycheck by paycheck. It wasn't just a hobby. It was a reminder that after a long day of work, I still had something that was mine, something I'd earned. And now, it sat bent and scratched in my garage. Thanks to a woman who couldn't stand the thought of someone else enjoying themselves. But unlike Karen, I wasn't about to let emotions lead me to destruction. I had a better weapon: facts, footage, and a little patience. The first thing I did was pull the footage from my security cameras. Clear as day, you could see her SUV whipping around the corner, crossing slightly into my driveway and hitting the handlebar of my bike. Didn't matter how slight the contact was. What mattered was that it proved everything I'd said at the HOA meeting. I had also recorded her yelling about leaving it in the road, which only made her look worse. I saved that footage to a thumb drive and headed to the local police department. The officer at the front desk took one look at the video and called over a supervisor. They watched it again, this time with raised eyebrows. Looks like she's lucky no one was standing closer to that bike. The supervisor said. They filed the report, opened an investigation into property damage, and told me they'd be contacting Karen for a statement. That alone gave me a small sense of satisfaction. But I wasn't done. Back at home, I noticed Karen's SUV parked neatly across her driveway as usual, gleaming white, spotless, with a custom laugh, love decal slapped across the rear window. I had to laugh. She drove that SUV like it was a tank, but decorated it like a Pinterest board. The next HOA meeting was just 3 days away. I showed up early with my folder, my thumb drive, and a printed summary of the incident. Karen showed up late, as usual, and when she saw me sitting in the front row, her face twitched ever so slightly. The meeting began with routine complaints: grass length, unapproved fences, trash bins left out too long. But then it shifted. Next up, the chairwoman said, "We have a resident incident that was reported last week involving personal property damage and an HOA board member." All eyes turned to me. I stood, introduced myself again, and calmly laid out what had happened. I handed out still images from the security footage and gave the board a copy of the police report. Then I played the clip on the clubhouse TV, Karen's SUV turning the corner, clipping my motorcycle, and her voice yelling afterward. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the questions started, not for me, but for Karen. Were you aware the bike was in his driveway? Did you file an accident report? Why did you leave the scene? Karen was cornered. She stammered, tried to twist the narrative, saying I had intentionally placed the bike too close to the street, that it was creating a safety hazard, and she had panicked when it tipped over. But none of it held up. The footage made her look reckless, petty, and dangerous. The board went into a closed discussion while we waited in the hallway. I stood by the vending machine, watching Karen pace back and forth like a caged lion. She didn't say a word to me, just shot daggers with her eyes. After 20 minutes, the board called us back in. They issued Karen a formal reprimand for reckless behavior and violating community safety protocols. While they couldn't force her to pay for the damages directly since it was under police investigation, they did suspend her from participating in any board-related enforcement actions until further notice. They also announced they'd be reviewing the community noise policy to ensure it couldn't be abused in petty personal vendettas. It wasn't everything, but it was more than I expected. After the meeting, a few residents approached me quietly. "Hey, man, sorry about your bike. She's always been over the top. She once tried to fine my wife for hanging laundry. You did the right thing." Turns out, I wasn't the only one who'd had run-ins with Karen. I was just the first to stand up and bring receipts. But of course, Karen didn't take the suspension lightly. Over the next week, she doubled down. Passive-aggressive Facebook posts popped up in the HOA group about motorhead hooligans ruining neighborhoods and how leadership can be poisoned by outsiders. She started parking her SUV just inches from my driveway, waiting outside. In her car with the engine running whenever I opened my garage. It wasn't subtle, but it was creepy. I stayed calm, kept documenting everything, and took the time to fix my bike. A new clutch lever, a replacement mirror, and a little buffing. Got it looking almost like new. But emotionally, I wasn't letting this go. Because while Karen had attacked my property, this was really about something bigger. About entitlement. About someone believing that the rules didn't apply to her. And about how ISLE and HOA could become a weapon when placed in the wrong hands. She wanted to silence me. Instead, she gave me the loudest reason to fight back. After Karen hit my motorcycle with her SUV, got suspended from her precious HOA duties, and began a passive-aggressive campaign against me, you'd think she might back off. But no, Karen was a storm that didn't fade, just shifted direction. And the direction was still very much aimed at me. She couldn't find me anymore. Couldn't patrol the neighborhood with a clipboard, and couldn't hide behind the HOA bylaws. But she still had her voice and, unfortunately, a decent number of followers in the neighborhood who didn't like change. Karen began holding unofficial community chats at her house. I wasn't invited, but I didn't have to be. I started hearing about them from neighbors who were growing tired of her vendetta. She called you a menace. One guy whispered to me at the mailbox, said you were bringing in a bad element with that bike. Another neighbor added, like we're living in a retirement village and not a suburb. I could have ignored her. I could have waited her out. But after she nearly totaled my bike and tried to gaslight the entire neighborhood, I wasn't in the mood to be the bigger person, so I decided to take the high road but make it loud that weekend. I hosted a small community BBQ. Not just any BBQ, I made flyers, created a sign that read Neighborhood Peace Ride, and rolled out my newly polished Harley at the center of my front yard like a monument. I also invited a few friends from a local motorcycle club. Not the rowdy, leather-clad stereotype. These were ex-Marines, engineers, even a pastor. Respectful guys who also just loved bikes and good food. By 1 p.m., my driveway was lined with chrome and laughter. Neighbors stopped by with their kids. Kids sat on bikes. Adults took selfies, and the grill was serving hot dogs and burgers like clockwork. The air buzzed with friendly chatter and, yes, the occasional deep rumble of an engine starting up. It's just enough to make Karen grind her teeth across the street behind her curtains, but I wasn't breaking any rules. No music above city code. No riding on neighborhood streets. Every engine startup was quick, brief, and legal. I made sure of it, because this time, I wasn't just proving a point, I was teaching a lesson. Karen eventually stepped outside around 3 p.m. Her arms were crossed, sunglasses on, expression twisted into that signature judgmental frown. She didn't come over. She didn't even wave. She watched. Oh, she watched everything. Then she did what she does best, called the cops. 20 minutes later, a squad car rolled up slowly and parked across the street. I met the officer at the curb with a plate of food in my hand and an HOA noise policy. In my back pocket, "Afternoon, officer," I said with a smile. "Hear about the motorcycle riot?" He smirked. "Got a complaint about a loud gathering?" Doesn't look too wild to me. I handed him the policy and the city noise ordinance, along with my decibel meter readings from earlier that day. The officer looked around, saw families laughing and kids enjoying popsicles, then nodded. Double quotes, "Well," he said, "looks like a peaceful day to me." Karen came stomping across the street at that exact moment. Officer, this man is disturbing the neighborhood. These bikers are trespassing. They're intimidating people with their loud machines and meaves and smoking meat in public. The officer blinked. "Ma'am, this is his property. I see no laws being broken here. Unless you have evidence of a crime, I suggest heading back inside." Karen's jaw dropped. But, this is a residential zone. These people, this event is a clear disruption. Actually, I cut in. Section 4B of the HOA bylaws allows residential social events as long as they don't block traffic or exceed. The noise ordinance? I checked. Karen stared at me like I'd just kicked her dog. The officer gave a polite nod and walked back to his car. Karen stormed back into her house, slamming the door loud enough for half the street to hear. A few people clapped. One of my biker friends muttered, "You sure she doesn't need a helmet for all that rage?" After the BBQ, something changed. Neighbors who had once avoided the HOA drama started speaking up. A few even ran for open board positions. Karen's grip on the community began to slip. People were tired of the over-policing, the petty fines, and the toxic gossip threads by the next HOA election cycle. Karen lost her seat entirely. The new board reversed several of her policies, including the vague noise violation clause she had weaponized against me. They implemented a clearer set of rules, and even added a clause that encouraged mediation before formal citations. But the biggest shift wasn't in paperwork, it was in attitude. Neighbors started riding bikes again. One guy bought a scooter. A few teens down the block started skateboarding more freely, no longer afraid of Karen's angry glare from behind her window. The atmosphere in the neighborhood felt lighter, freer. As for my motorcycle, I kept riding it respectfully, legally, and proudly. Every once in a while, I still catch Karen watching from behind her blinds. Her SUV remains parked in the exact same spot, but she hasn't spoken a word to me since that day. And honestly, she doesn't need to. I already heard the only thing that mattered from one of the newer residents who moved in a month later. "I heard about your whole motorcycle battle," he said. "You're kind of a legend around here now." I smiled and looked over at my bike, parked quietly in the garage. Legend or not, he was just a guy who stood up, stayed loud, and refused to be run over.